Good to go.
Okay. So welcome everyone, and actually due to the virtual format of today's meeting, we start by providing a couple of guidelines. And as a reminder, we like to say that this meeting is being recorded and will be posted on the Human Services Commission webpage and will be available for viewing. And we've been recording the meetings for the Human Services Commission, and moving forward, I guess that will remain recorded. Correct, Anna, Monica?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, good. So, and we have participants that are attending by computers, but other also may be attending by phone. And for all meeting attendees, please, we'll like for you to speak clearly and pause frequently. State your name each time before speaking. Mute your microphone when not speaking, so we have a clear communication from other participants. And if we have technical issues, please try joining the meeting using a different device, either a phone or a tablet, and use the call-in information in the meeting invite to call into the meeting. And please, when you have comments, please do speak clearly. And we use the chat simply by indicating whether or not we have a question or a comment. But all comments, we encourage everyone to make comments by speaking clearly on the microphone. We'll start with attendance as well. I don't know, Monica or Pana, we noted that Manny is not going to present today. Do we have any other attendance updates?
Thank you, Pat. So Commissioner Manny Brown has an excused absent tonight, and we are still waiting for Kiran Singh, so she'll be joining us hopefully soon. Thank you, Pat.
And so we already talked about guidelines for comments from panelists. Please state your comments in the microphone and do not use the chat for lengthy comments, because we would like for any community member who are not, who can't have access to the chat to follow our conversations. And also we have other functions and in this forum, and please, when you would like participants, when you would like to talk, please raise your hand and or make a sign, and you'll be given the floor for your comments. And that is all for the guidelines. Anything else to add?
That's it, Pat. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
So I think the next item on the agenda, looking at the agenda, is the selection of the chair and vice chair. So I'm happy to jump in and take that. Good evening, commissioners. This is Monica Negrilla. I'm the Human Services Manager here. I'm working with Hannah, and such a nice evening to see you all. As you may recall, at our previous meeting last month, we had talked about having a selection for a chair and vice chair. So it is customary for the city that in May or June, in this case, each year, we select a new chair and a new vice chair. This is because it aligns well with the city's recruitment process. In April is when we typically onboard new commissioners. And the first meeting in May is when we select the new chair and vice chair. Typically, they run for a one-year term with always the option to continue in that term or it is also customary that perhaps the vice chair, after serving for 1 or 2 terms, can move into the chair position and so forth. So just providing opportunities to all the commissioners to have leadership roles. And so with that, the process that we are going to use for selecting the chair and vice chair is, first I will call for nominations, and then once we hear the nominations, then we will close them. If we have more than one nomination, we will have a discussion, and then we will vote on each of the nominations. If we have only one nominee, then we will vote and we will consider just, of course, that person is our next chair. And following that, we'll use the same process for selecting the vice chair as well. Do you have any questions before we start with this? No questions? Okay. And what I can add as a brief note before I request the nominations be made, I just want to say a few words about the role of the chair. It's typically the chair in our commission would facilitate the meetings. We'll work with staff on creating the agenda items. At times, we'll also participate in interviews for the new members. And then the vice chair, of course, steps in the chair role when the vice chair is not available. So with that, I would like to open the floor for nominations for the chair position. Any nominations? If you have, please notice Pat said, please put comments in the chat. I would love to call on you. Or just raise your hand too. I see Pat here.
I have a nomination for Trish as a chair.
Oh, thank you. So you're nominating Trish as a chair. Any other nominations for chair positions? No, don't be shy. Feel free to speak up. If no other nominations are being made, I will close the nominations. And then with that, I would just ask that all of those in favor, or actually I should ask Trish if she accepts the nomination.
I accept the nomination.
Okay.
And I realize it's a highly coveted position.
Thank you so much, Trish. And we appreciate your service in the community. I know that prior to serving on the Human Services Commission, you served for multiple years on the Arts Commission. And you are so involved in different organizations and community organizations, nonprofits work here in our city. So we are truly lucky to have you on the commission. And so with that, I think all in favor of having Trish as our chair for the next year, please say aye, or we can also do a roll call since we are virtual. Pat?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. I think everyone said aye. Pat, you wanted to say something, or were you saying aye? 5. Okay.
Aye. Mm-hmm.
Anyone? I think everybody said aye.
Yes, and we have Madeline with some audio issues. However, she messaged aye. So she is also doing her voting. Thank you, Madeline.
Thank you, Hannah. That's very helpful. Okay, I don't think I need to ask if there are any objections because everybody said aye already. So I'm just gonna pass that. And thank you so much. Congratulations, Trish. You are our new chair. Again, thank you. Okay, and now on to selecting the vice chair. I think we use the same format. So I would like to open the floor and call for nominations for the vice chair position.
This is Maury Edwards. I nominate Pat to be the vice chair.
Oh, thank you, Maury. Any other nominations?
I second it.
You seconded. Okay, great. Thank you. Any other nominations? Here, none. Would be nice to also check in with Madeline. But is Madeline able to call in at least so we can hear her, or there's no way if we unmute her?
I'm on mute. Let me see if I can unmute her. Okay. Madeline, we can hear you, it sounds like.
Can you?
We can
Yes.
hear your
Yay.
microphone. I just had to unmute you.
Okay, I'm raising my hands and I was saying aye for the nomination for vice chair
Okay.
for Pat.
Okay. Thank you. So yes, if I see, then I hear no other nominations unless Jaime or Jamie have other nominations. But if not, then we can go ahead and vote. But before that, Pat, would you like to accept the nomination to be vice chair for another term?
Yes, it's an honor. Thank you.
Thank you, and it is an honor as well. We so appreciate you, and I'm so glad that you are serving on the commission. Okay, commissioners, let's then, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Anyone who, what else I'm trying to say? What's the word I'm trying to use?
Opposed?
Opposed. There you go. Thank you, Maury. Sometimes English is at the end of the day. It's not my. Anyone opposed or having any objections? I hear none. Speak now or forever hold your peace. I think I heard everyone say aye, though. Thank you. Congratulations, Pat and Trish, as the new leadership for the Human Services Commission.
Thank you.
And so with that, we have the option, again, as we said, the role of the chair is to facilitate meetings. Trish, if you feel comfortable and you would like, you can continue to facilitate the meeting, or if Pat would like to continue, whoever wants to continue to facilitate the meeting for the evening, please go ahead.
Pat, you're welcome to if you want.
No, please go ahead, Trish, and I will support you if there is a need, but I don't think there will be.
Oh, okay. All right, good. You can be my backup. All right. Okay. Well, we're moving into public comments, right? Okay. Well, I'm just going to make the general comment that public comments are an important part of the public process. We take them seriously and we factor them into the decisions we make. So I'm going to ask Hannah if we've received any written public comments or if we have anybody that's called in to make public comments.
Thank you, Trish. No, we did not receive any public comments written, and we do not have any public in attendees to make a public statement. Thank you, Trish.
Okay. Let me see. Now we're okay, and Monica and Hannah, you guys jump in as well as you, Pat, if there's something I've missed. But we're moving into the approval of the minutes now, right? So has everybody had a chance to look over the May 18th minutes? And I can give people, I mean, ideally we all need to look at them before we come to this meeting, but if people want a little time to brush up, feel free to look at them. And then somebody needs to make a motion.
I move that this is Maury Edwards. I move that we approve the minutes as written.
This is Jamie, I second.
Okay, they're approved. Oh, no, we have to vote. We have to vote, right? Okay. Okay, what, Monica?
So Trish, if I may, you have the option to vote, but you also have the option to just ask the commission if there are no objections, and if you don't, to invite the commission to speak up if there are objections or edits, and if there are none, then you can just consider the minutes approved and anonymously. It's just one easier and quicker way to do it for the minutes.
You're right. You're right. Okay, so you guys heard what Monica just said. Does anybody have any comments or edits they would like to make? Okay, with that, I will assume that everybody has approved the minutes and we can move on. Is that the quickest way to do it? Okay, great. Okay, now we're moving into the staff report, and I'll give the floor to Monica.
Thank you, Trish. This is Monica again. So I would like to start with a brief update from Mayor and City Council, and giving you an update that next week on June 22nd, Human Services staff will be presenting at the city's newly created Services, Safety and Parks Committee. We have several human services items that go to be discussed with the committee. One of them is the emergency housing program project that we shared with you last month. If you recall, at that time we were sharing with you that our homeless outreach program has had the chance to work with quite a few homeless persons in Issaquah over the last year. And one of the needs that we identified during this time was really lack of services in Issaquah. So we would like to go and discuss with City Council the possibility of considering an emergency housing program in collaboration with Motel 6. And what we propose is to pilot for 1 year, renting, let's say, a dozen rooms at Motel 6 that we would kind of like turn into an emergency housing shelter type program. So we are excited about that. We received your feedback last time that you were excited about the project as well. If you have time and interest to watch the meeting or to attend the meeting, we would definitely love to have you there. So that's one item that's going to be discussed next week. Another item that also directly impacts the work that you do, we are going to continue conversation with the committee on creating a formula for human services grants allocations. So the funding amount is decided by City Council. So we are discussing that as well. And last but not least, we are going to discuss with City Council recommendations that the city received from ARCH being a coalition, a regional coalition for housing here on the east side, regarding some tenant protection options. So we will be discussing those with the committee as well. So once again, if you have capacity and interest, feel free to watch the meeting live, or of course, all of those meetings are also recorded, so you can watch it at a later time as well. And of course, we will be providing updates to you at these meetings as well. So that concludes my update, and I'm gonna invite Hannah to provide you with some other updates.
Thank you so much, Monica.
Real quick,
Oh,
Monica, is
yeah, honey.
the June 22nd City Council meeting around the Human Services Strategic Plan, is that in person, or is that still just being, via, Zoom, WebEx, kind of thing?
Great question, Jaime. Thank you for that. So all of our council meetings now are in hybrid option. So participants can attend online or in person. Typically, the council members are in person, but as an attendee, the community can attend both ways.
Okay,
And we will send you that information on Friday, how to attend virtually, the link and whatnot. Great questions. Other questions, Maury?
I was just going to ask if you were going to send us out the link.
Yes, it's typically, it's going to be published either tomorrow or on Friday. So when it's published, we will forward it to you.
Thank you.
I have a question, Monica. I'm assuming that you will be at council chambers presenting in person?
Yes,
Okay.
I plan to be there. Yes. Thank you. Great questions. And Hannah, I think the floor is yours. I just wanted to mention that I see that we have a phone number calling in. It may be Madeline.
Yeah, I just confirmed that is Madeline. So she
Thank
said
you.
she can mute and unmute herself now. So
And welcome, Kieran. I see that you're able to join as well. Good evening.
hi, Karen. Can you hear us? Okay. All right. It looks like you're unmute, but I don't know if we can hear you. So we'll have to work with your audio here. Well, I'll go ahead and move us forward onto our staff report. So our next section here is our Human Services Commission updates. So I have a few exciting events to share with you all. You may have seen some of my emails I sent, but kind of wanted to spend a little time to talk about these upcoming events that we are so excited to be hosting. Honoring Juneteenth is our first event coming up this Monday on the 20th. This will be in person at the Senior Center in Issaquah. It's going to be starting at 5 p.m., but we will be having food trucks arrive at 4:30. So just want to encourage you all to please consider joining us in person for this event. Bring your friends, bring your family. It's going to be just an incredible evening of just community and fellowship together. We'll be featuring Delbert Richardson, and he is from the Unspoken Truths. And we will also be having members from the equity board there, sharing stories and experiences. The mayor will be there as well. And then one thing I want to mention here is we will be having a silent auction for art pieces by actually Manny Brown. So he's not here today, but I am telling you, they are gorgeous, absolutely beautiful artwork and pieces. He's very talented. So please consider joining us for the in-person event on the 20th. Lots going on and things to be excited about. So that is that event. And then we have one shortly afterwards for honoring Pride Month. That'll be Thursday, June 23rd. That's going to be a virtual conversation. We will be having featuring panelists from different organizations who work with the LGBTQIA+ community, and we'll be having some great conversations around that community and that partnership that we have with our organizations. And so just want to invite you again that it's a virtual event. And so please consider registering for both of those. So those are events that we're looking forward to. And then a few other just housekeeping items here. You may have also seen some emails from our human resources in regards to deconstructing our biases training for boards and commissioners. So if you have not signed up and registered for one, please consider doing that. We have one that they're looking to fill a few spots tomorrow at 6 p.m. Otherwise, we have another one late in June, and then there'll be another cycle in September. So again, great training opportunity. We did it internally, and I'm excited to now offer it to our board and commissions. So please consider just registering for one of those. And then if you have not already, you can email our human resource analyst, Candy Lorenzo, and if you feel comfortable giving some of your demographic information, the city is collecting some information. I think new commissioners may have provided this information, but if you have not, please consider doing so as soon as you can. And just any questions?
Yeah, I do.
Yes.
This is Maury Edwards. I'm wondering what time the Pride Month virtual conversation starts, Hannah.
Thank you. So that's going to be starting at 6:30.
Thank you.
Yeah. And then Monica, I saw your hand.
Thank you, Hannah. I just wanted to add to your comment that commissioners, we realized that you just finished an equity training with the other East Side cities. And so I also understand and see that also we are gearing up to a busier summer. However, if you do have the capacity, I would so strongly recommend that you also attend the internal city equity trainings. I think it would just provide for a better understanding of what city staff, what kind of trainings they are doing, and just providing that opportunity for all of us to kind of like move in the same direction. It may feel, especially for you that you conducted training, it may feel maybe a little bit like, okay, this is equity training 101 once again. But again, just for the reasons I mentioned, I would encourage you, if you have the opportunity, to attend one of those. So thank you.
Great. Thanks, Monica. I have no other questions. That concludes my portion of the staff report. So I'm going to hand it back to Trish to keep us moving along.
Okay, I think we're moving to our first agenda item. And I guess it's going to be a presentation by both Monica and Hannah on the grant review follow-up.
Great. Thank you so much, Trish. So I'm going to go ahead and if you want to give me a minute, just share my screen here. 1 second. On my calendar. All right, let me get this presentation up. 1 second. Okay. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and get us started. So thank you everyone again for joining us this evening. Tonight for this agenda item, we are going to just really be looking at our Human Services Grant Application review follow-up from our last commission meeting. And really what we want to do is spend a little more time and detail in reviewing the applications and understanding that. I received some great questions from commissioners that I included in this presentation so we can have a larger discussion. So I'll be presenting those Q&A. And then also we're going to move forward and look at the review card. I received just a few recommendations on that. I just want to make sure everybody has a great understanding of the review card. And again, there's going to be time this evening to bring up any questions or comments. Would love to hear some feedback and make sure that everybody feels confident in this review process. And then one of the topics that we received some of your feedback from last meeting was our funding allocation process. And so we're going to also spend a little time there with recommendations and some further information on that. I'll keep us going here. So again, just as a background and reminder, we received 81 applications with 49 organizations, and we had a total request amount of over $1.3 million. Again, we currently have $500,000 per annual cycle. What we've done so far is we have divided our commissioners into groups. And so we have 3 groups with 2 commissioners assigned to our housing continuum. That includes our housing affordability and homelessness programs. We have a large group here with 3 commissioners reviewing 34 applications that go under the physical and behavioral health category. And then the other category they are reviewing is language access and cultural services. We also have another group with 27 programs who will be reviewing our community resources applications. So thank you all for being very responsive in those emails and with some great questions. So again, I just want to step back again and just provide a reminder of what's your role in this, as you have now been stepping into looking at these applications and possibly feeling a little bit overwhelmed in this process. Just want to get you back to the roots of okay, I'm a commissioner, what's my role? So again, the biggest thing is reviewing these applications. Spend time, get to know these organizations through their applications within the assigned category that you have. The next thing is use the review card tool that we've created. We really set that up so that way it could be a helpful guidance tool for commissioners to help them understand what are Issaquah priorities, to help determine which category should we fund them, should we not, should we have discussions. So I just encourage you all to continue to use that review tool card to help determine how to fund and allocate. And then ultimately, right, our goal is to provide these recommendations to our mayor and city council of how we think we can use our funding to best support our community. So, excuse me. We are going to dive into our questions and answers. And again, I received some great questions from commissioners. I'm going to provide some questions some answers here. And what I'd like is if you have additional questions within that one question, please raise your hand and we can continue dialogue on that question. After I go over all of our Q&A, we'll have further time where I'll stop sharing and we can have a further discussion for other folks to ask different questions. So Monica, if you could help me monitor and just pause me if there's a hand since I can't quite see, that would be great.
Sounds good.
Okay, so one of the questions here was, what do contracts and reimbursement requests look like? So basically that's asking, okay, we have provided our funding recommendations. They've been approved by the mayor and the city council. So now what? So now what happens is human services staff, Monica and I, we work with these nonprofit organizations to create a contract, which then will go into a scope of work. And a scope of work is a defined and measurable amount of service units. So what I'm going to do here is I will share what that looks like as a review. I'm also going to share what these invoices and reimbursement requests look like and go over that, as well as our annual reports that we do require. So let me take this off. And I will go ahead and set us up into a contract. Okay, just so you can see a little bit better. Okay, so our contract is a pretty standardized form that you can see here that we do fill in. Ultimately, it's an agreement between the city of Issaquah and our community partners and organizations. So they're agreeing to the terms of the duration, liability terms, contract terms, insurance, details that I don't need to go too much into tonight, but just wanted to have a high level overview so you can see what it looks like. What I want to spend a little more time in is our scope of work here. You can see which is a part of the contract. And our scope of work is ultimately measuring the outcomes of the organization. So I will pull up here. This is what a reimbursement form looks like. So the organizations put their information and the amount that they're requesting. Oops. Sorry, hold on. Oh, it's freezing. Technical issues, folks. 1 second. Thank you. And really what I want to focus on is here is our service units. So many of you have asked, you know, ultimately, did they meet their service unit goals? So this is how we can measure it. And we can ultimately measure our residents. So I put some examples here. You have for example, if a shelter, it's measured by bed nights and they measure number of beds. So we set an annual goal and they tell us each quarter how many bed nights did they have in their shelter, as an example. You have, for another example, financial aid and household, number of households helped with rent. And again, we review the quarterly goals, we meet them, and we help them determine if they're if they're on track to meet their annual goals. The other thing that they measure here is residents. And so every quarter they measure unduplicated residents so we can know every quarter and annually how many Issaquah residents are they serving. So in addition to the reimbursement forms, we do require at the end of the year an outcome report. And this is determined again on the scope of work. So did they meet their outcome goals for their organization? And then we also look at their demographics, how many households they met, age, gender, that information.
Great work, Hannah. I would like to add, commissioners, that all of the contracts that the city enters in with other organizations, let's say your recommendations are to fund agency X for $10,000. When we enter into an agreement, the agreement is going to ask for number of Issaquah residents that are going to be served with that amount that you recommended and city council approved. So all of the money that the city provides to organizations goes to serve directly Issaquah residents. And this, as Hannah showed you on those spreadsheets, typically we have a list of different cities, and we require that number of residents for our city, for our purpose, are always highlighted, so we know exactly how many residents they served in our city and how many services they provided to those residents. So that's by default for each of the cities, really, and for all of our contracts here in Issaquah.
Great. Thanks, Monica. I appreciate that. And Trish, it looks like you have a question.
So theoretically, it's possible for us to enter into contract with an agency and have a goal of, let's say 100 residents served for the year. And theoretically, 0 residents could be served, right? You're saying yes.
Yes, but they would not be paid.
Right. So that money would be basically set aside because we had entered into contract with them, but they would never, because it's a reimbursement grant, they would not be paid. Okay.
Exactly. Yes. And that money, any leftover money at the end of the year would go back into the general fund
Okay.
of the city.
Thank you.
Okay, great. All right, looks like Mari, you have a question.
It's not going in on you there, Anna.
I know.
Okay, so then for us to know, as we're evaluating these things on our sheets that you sent us, and we're looking at their budget, then we can go to their 2023 requested dollar amount, and we can also compare that to their projected service units. Is that what I'm looking for, is service units? That's the number of people that they'll be serving?
So service units can be measured in depending on what their organization's goals are and services are. So for example, some service units can be measured in appointments, right?
Sure, or packages of groups of things. Yeah.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
then in that case, then it'd be, you look at residents served, that's pretty much what it is that's the number we're looking at, is how many residents are served. Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. No, I got distracted. Monica, go.
It's both, Maury. So we always look at how many services and how many residents, right? And they can have, depending on how many services, they can have multiple services, but always we
Right.
look at, because sometimes we have, let's say they do meet the number of residents served, but perhaps they are low in services, right? Let's say they did provide services to 20 residents, but perhaps they weren't able to provide as many services to those, or the other way around. So we look at both.
I see. Okay. Thank you, Monica.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Great. Well, I'll keep us moving along then. To our next question here that was brought up. Sorry, one second. All right. Another question here is, do we look at outcomes from previous funding cycle and consider outcome performance? Great question here. So in past funding cycles, commissioners really did not consider previous cycle performance, but that is something that as staff we do monitor closely as we're working with reimbursements, and we provide commissioners with a performance outcomes biannually. So this is something that if it's information that you are interested in, we can certainly provide that for you. But the one thing that we do want to have is, again, the equity lens, and really just that question of, how would you like to approach past performances for organizations that did not receive funding in the past? So really the question is who's the most impacted? So for example, if we have a new organization coming in, we don't have a necessarily comparison, right? We don't have the previous year outcome performance. So that is something that we want to keep in mind as we're considering our equity lens and reviewing the applications. So again, ultimately, it's an outcome we typically don't look at, but we have the information and happy to provide that for you. And if there's any questions, if you just want to unmute yourself and go ahead and just jump in.
And while you do that, commissioners, I'm going to add to what Hannah just said so well. The fact is that when we work with you, we would absolutely let you know if there are any organizations that we have serious concerns about, let's say, saying they never met any outcomes or so, right? Because one, we would not wait for 2 years for that to pass. Typically, at the end of each quarter, as we receive reports, we always look at performance. And if people don't meet the goals in the contract, typically we contact them and we problem solve with them. We provide technical assistance. We try to support them in any way to make sure that they meet their goals. So we would work with them. And of course, if there are serious concerns, then we would not let you make recommendations if that's the case. So I hope that helps a little bit.
Yeah. Thank
This
you,
is
Monica.
Jamie. I have a quick question. My question is, when you do these quarterly check-ins with them, do they provide like financial information to you guys that like show, hey, this is the cost of the services that we provided each individual?
So is it okay if I take this one, Hannah?
Yes, please.
Thank you, Jamie. Great question. So typical financial information, we only request every 2 years, where we ask for the financial information for the entire agency. And we also ask for go deeper into the financial information when we do on-site monitoring or virtual monitoring. So typically it doesn't happen every quarter, but it's at least every year, every other year, we do monitoring of the agencies. And at that time, we ask for financial information and any previous reports that they might have had against them.
Okay, I'll keep us moving forward then.
I have a question, but maybe this is not the right time to ask for it. I might wait until the end of the presentation because it's really on the card, the review card. So I'll wait till the end then.
Thanks, Pat. Yes, I do have a section right after this that we're going to have a further discussion on that. Thank you. So the next one is, do we consider previous funding history with city? So staff does provide input of organizations that are heavily utilized in the city for consideration. But we really do want to keep an equitable approach and should be based on meeting the needs of the Issaquah community. And again, those really have been highlighted in our strategic plan, which have also been included in the review tool. So it's really, when we meet with you in the review groups, we can really help inform you of organizations that, again, are heavily used by Issaquah residents. But again, it's really should be approached of what is our need for our community, and does this program meet those needs? Anything else? Or any questions? All right, another question here. Do we consider funding history and or requests made to other cities? So you can see here in the budget, you're seeing other city requests. So as far as other cities goes, short answer is no. We do not consider funding requests made to these other cities. So each city has its own review process and its their independent priorities. It's something that we do not within Issaquah consider. We just focus on really what benefits our city and coordinate funding for those programs. So here really coordinating funding would be, in an ideal world, would be a very helpful goal to have. And that's something that we can certainly visit for our next funding cycle. And then as far as funding history, it does not imply, so if we have provided them funding last cycle, it doesn't automatically imply that we need to or will fund them for this next funding cycle. It certainly may be considered, but it's something that is not necessary. Again, continuing that equity lens of what ultimately meets our community needs. Okay, and then our last question here before I really open it up. Do organizations that don't have a physical address in Issaquah provide services physically in Issaquah? So that question I think is great in regards to our review tool, right? We are prioritizing services that are accessible, which can mean physically located in Issaquah. So the answer to this is some organizations, if they don't necessarily have a physical building in Issaquah, it really just depends. Some organizations do, and some organizations don't have that capability. If they are providing services to Issaquah residents, it's going to be either first, online virtual services has been really utilizing these last couple of years. There are some organizations that have what we call pop-up sites. Some organizations will use the senior center, for example, and have monthly meetings there to meet with residents in person. There's also satellite offices in Issaquah. Excuse me. And then if not, then it is residents would need to travel to their physical location. And that's why we consider if it's accessible for public transportation. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing and see if there's any other questions.
I just had a comment. These are all really helpful. So thank you, everybody that submitted questions, because this is a good collection of questions, and it's helping me now as I think through the batch of grants I'm reviewing.
Yeah, so I have a couple of questions. The first question on around, and it's still just detail around the scoring card. When we provide a score, and you know how you have that category, the green, the yellow, and the red. For each of the information, are we supposed to say something in each of the squares about the grant we've reviewed, or not at all?
Such a great question, Pat. I think absolutely yes, it would be great for you to provide comment under, let's say you have organization A and you assign them a yellow category. It would be nice to have a brief explanation as to why you did that. And we will keep that information. We will ask you that you share that information with us, and we will keep it in archives in case later on we will be asked for information on why we decided one way or the other. So you don't need to provide in each square for the one agency, but the one agency just explaining like why you chose that color or whatnot would be helpful. And it's can also help in the deliberations with your group, right? Because the way we envision it is that you're going to spend some time individually to review them, make some comments, then we are going to meet in the smaller groups all together, and we are going to start deliberations, right? And then you might have a yellow note assigned to organization X, whereas maybe another commissioners might have a green assigned, and then we will deliberate on why one or the other. So it's going to be very helpful for you to have those comments.
Thanks, Monica. Now I recall you saying something like that maybe 2 months ago, and it's just now that I'm going through the process, it's coming back to me. Okay.
No worries, absolutely, Pat. It makes sense. It's like there's just so much information, and in the end, the pieces of the puzzles come together, right? But yes, Thank you. Great questions.
One more question, and I'll let someone else ask the question. I was reviewing the grants, and I wanted to understand for specific organizations what were the overheads. Well, what was used as salaries or compensation, and that wasn't going directly into service, right? And then I realized at one point, everything for this specific organization, everything was lumped into, let's say, 10 or 13 people, and all the salary and further, disaggregated into benefits and all that, right? And I thought, well, if there are 13 people getting 900K, for instance, right? What is executive getting compared to the people who are really doing the work? But I couldn't find that information. Is it something we can request or not at all at this point, or maybe in the next round?
Right. No, great questions, Pat. So we have a couple of options. On one end, I definitely am so glad you brought it up. If there are questions that you have about specific applications as you read them, perhaps something is not clear, you would like more information on something, please make a list, write them down, send them to us, and then as we get all the questions from commissioners, we will connect with the agencies and send them one list of questions. So that's definitely an option to ask further questions. Typically, now in particular regarding the financial information, certainly if there's something that catches your eye and you feel like, oh, this doesn't add up, or I would like to understand more, absolutely we will ask. The note that I would like to make is, regardless though of the salary information, we as a city, we do not pay for their salaries, for an agency salary. We pay, as we talked earlier, we only pay for the residents served. So basically, we are looking at what's the cost for service for one resident, right? So let's say if we find an organization fund them for $10,000 and they serve 10 residents for that $10,000, we do the math and we say, the cost of service for that resident, it's about $1,000. And we are going to look, what kind of services are you providing for $1,000 for service? And if it's not in the market range, then we would go to them and have a conversation and say, it may make sense to have a service for $1,000 for this medical procedure that's but for perhaps this type of service, $1,000 seems like too much, so then we wouldn't go for that. Does that make sense? Okay.
Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. So, but yes,
Monica.
great. Yeah, great questions. Please do put together those questions, and we can follow up with the organizations.
And then Mari, looks like you have a question here.
Okay, so Maury Edwards again. I wanted to convey the three things that Manny Brown had concerns about, just so that you know his concerns. First of all, we had, when Manny and Trish and I met, Trish developed a sheet that we could use, and we were discouraged from using that sheet, and we're not using it. But Manny and I both feel that the city of Issaquah should look at that and perhaps consider that and develop it or vet it as it is for future people to use. We both feel like it was a pretty good tool. Secondly, Manny wanted to say that each of us have our own biases. He's focusing on how many BIPOC are employed and how many BIPOC are being served. He wanted to talk about that, just to bring that into the conversation. The last thing was, he said, as a whole, we can't disregard those who aren't serving Issaquah directly. There's got to be some way where we can, because the surrounding communities affect what happens in Issaquah. And an example that he used was, you have a neighborhood where a house is on fire and it happens to be the people of color's house. You don't sprinkle the water on the white people's house to make sure that it's going to be okay, and keep it from burning while the black people's house burns down. That we need to keep those kinds of things in mind, that even though we're not served directly, we are impacted by surrounding communities. So those are his three concerns.
Thank you so much, Maury, for bringing them up. May I make a couple of comments to them and respond perhaps with some clarifications?
Yeah.
So thank you so much for the first comment. Thank you so much for bringing up the tool that the three of you used. And I want to clarify that it wasn't for us to discourage you to use that. I think the comment that we were trying to make was that amazing work in trying to get, we were not at the point yet to meet in threes. I think we are just now scheduling meetings to meet in the groups. I think the intent for us was to encourage everyone for the first time between last month and now to just individually access the applications, review perhaps up to 5 of them, to see kind of like how it works, see what questions do you have about the application process. And now that we discuss all of these, next we are going to move into meeting with the small groups. So that was for us, because what we noticed was you were very, very excited and you met in the groups of 3, but you had a lot of questions that we did not have an opportunity to provide you with support for. So absolutely, I think the tool that Trish created, I think it's amazing and we should use it. And then absolutely, we would love to share it with, if others would like to use it, we are going to use something similar, but I think what Trish has is even better. So that's not, the point was not about not using the spreadsheet, if that makes sense.
Okay.
So just that, thank you. And then absolutely, I think as a board, we did an equity training for the second comment, equity training, that we should consider our biases. We all have them. We should consider the communities that are most impacted. And I think it's always great to look at organizations and their staff component and who they serve. So absolutely, I think that should be something that we all look into and consider. And last but not least, absolutely understand also the regional aspect. Once again, we always fund organizations, whether they are local or regional, or we always fund organizations that serve Issaquah, the Issaquah community. And there are many wonderful organizations that don't have a location here in Issaquah, yet provide really, really, really helpful services to our Issaquah residents. So absolutely, other thing, definitely those are things to consider. So thank you for bringing those up. And Miss Manny, looking forward to seeing him next time.
Yeah, and I wanted to second that. Thank you for, first of all, for Manny talking to you and asking for you to bring those forward. And those are really good comments that Manny brought up. Thanks.
Okay, great. So if there's no other questions, then we're going to go ahead and move on to our review tool. So let's see. So again, I just want to go over the review cards. I made one addition, and I'll be sure to send everybody the updated version. You can use, if you've already used the old versions, that's okay. It wasn't a huge change. And so what I want to do here is kind of review it and make sure that everybody ultimately feels comfortable using this review card and understand really the purpose. And so again, this is just a way to help you stay organized and guide you in determining, ultimately these 3 things. Do I recommend funding this organization? Do we need to discuss it further in a small group, or do I not recommend funding? And ultimately what's been listed here are what would allocate something to be in the green, yellow, or red category. And the one thing that was added was here under Issaquah residents. So ultimately, we're just, one question and recommendation was brought up is we have here accessibility, but ultimately, right, our goal is to serve Issaquah residents. That's where the funding is going. And so we wanted to include that, just clearly stating, does this program clearly serve and is accessible to Issaquah residents? Or is this program accessible with possible barriers to accessing services? Or is this not very clearly stated and is not very accessible to Issaquah residents? So that ultimately was the main thing that was added. But ultimately, the idea of to use this is kind of go through the list as you're looking at the application and just see, you can, commissioners use this in different forms. You could like circle, okay, it's under this category. Oh, this program description, it feels like maybe a yellow category. It's accessible. So you can kind of maybe go through and circle it, or you can just check it or just make a mental note. What I want to note here is additional notes. This is really where you can put some of your kind of bullet point thoughts of why you are recommending it to be green, yellow, or red, or what questions you might have. And again, this is to help you stay organized. The whole point of, or the intention is that one application should have one review card. And so I just want to stop here and just see if there's any questions or if anybody else wants to add anything. So everybody feels confident moving forward with their review card. They're happy with it. It makes sense and it's helpful. Oh, there we go. Pat.
Oh, no, it's just a comment that I found. Maybe some of you have gone through the same. I find myself reading some of application. They're good, they're strong, but now at one point I say, oh, they're very interesting, they're good, but then oh, are they really in need for our community? Although they're strong and they're well written, they are good, and the bottom line after, I mean, there were two of them, and I had to go forth for like, oh yeah, are they really in need? I've had yes, but I have to go back to the strategic plan and look into the strategic plan, and you know that was just, I just wanted to give it as a comment to all.
Thank you so much, Pat. Yeah, I imagine, I mean, like we warn you all, these are all incredible organizations and programs offering incredible services that are needed. So how do we narrow $1.3+ million? How do we squeeze that into $500,000? So yeah, I appreciate it's a hard task, and I appreciate you gearing back to the strategic plan because that's really what it's there for. But yeah, hard decisions ahead of us. Thank you, Pat. And then Madeline here had a question, so I'm gonna mute.
I think, can you hear me if I use my phone?
Yeah.
I can hear you now, Madeline.
Okay. My question was around the review card. In your perfect world, when we meet in our smaller groups, would we all have completed, would we all have individually completed one card for every grant that we looked at within our subgroup?
Yes, so we'll be reviewing that in our as we finish this presentation for our timeline and what next steps are. But yes, in our ideal world, where we would be at is when we have our next small subgroup review groups with Monica and I, that ultimately that you will have reviewed the applications and determined your green, yellow, and red, and then we can have further discussion on that. In our ideal world. So that would be in probably the second week of July. So more information to come on that.
Very good. Thank you.
Quick question, Hannah. For the grant review card, I like what I think Pat talked about, looking at the strategic plan, going back and forth. Do we send a grant review card to you all like in real time, or do we save them?
Great question, Jaime. So go ahead and save them. So save them, on your computer, whatever that may look like for you. And we will be reviewing that and the list that you have created in the review group. So you do not need to send it to us in real time unless you have any questions. So hold on to them.
And that was I think I read was don't make recommendation in terms like the funding. It's either recommended for the discussion or no funding in terms of the review card. My next question would be is if I do have questions, I'd just contact you and just say, hey, here's where I'm at, and as I navigate some of the I guess my portion.
Yes, you're
Okay.
welcome to send us individually. You can send me or Monica or both of us questions. Or
Okay.
if you want in like the additional box, you can kind of maybe write your questions there. So that way, when we are reviewing the individual program, you'll remember, oh yeah, I had this question, and we can discuss it in the review groups. That might be the most efficient way, but by all means, if you need to, if you have a burning question, of course, please feel free to contact us.
Thank you. Sounds good.
Thank you for these comments and questions, everyone. Again, the goal is we understand this is a lofty task, and reviewing these applications, it can be difficult and challenging. So we're trying to create a tool that makes sense and that can help simplify this process for everyone. So this feedback is always helpful. Okay. There are no other questions at this time. I'm going to go ahead and go back to our presentation. And I believe we are in our next portion, which I'm going to go ahead and pass off to Monica.
Thank you, Hannah. Well done. Hello, commissioners. Again, such great questions. And I want to share actually with you that I've been pondering on the suggestion that we heard from Manny through Mari, one of them, and I'm going to just bring it up here in a moment for further discussion. So wanted to go over a little bit with you some input that we received from City Council when in April we first discussed the Human Services grants funding allocations with them and perhaps a formula for those allocations. And I wanted to share with you some of the thoughts that City Council members had. Of course, they appreciate the work that we did on the Human Services Strategic Plan, and they wanted to remind us that, you know, we should ensure alignment and focus on the goals that were identified in that. So we already do that. I know we just wanted to highlight that from council. Also, we had council members who did encourage us to prioritize local services in the Issaquah community as much as possible. Then they said that we should consider increasing the funding level, in particular the average grant, to a level that would make an impact. So that would be possible for us if you know, with our funding allocation that we have currently, that would mean for us to consider funding fewer organizations to provide larger grants than more organizations with lower grants, right? And so they were encouraging us to keep in mind and identify those agencies and programs that we think that might yield more strategic results, so we actually can see that impact. And then as we consider those local and regional approaches, we received encouragement to really identify where we can make a difference, knowing that, you know, in human services, we can never have enough resources to meet all the needs. But considering all the other funding that's available at regional levels and in other programs and areas, where are those areas where we as a city can make a difference, and perhaps consider those for funding. And so with that, I can't help but, as I mentioned to you, I was pondering on the great feedback received from Manny, as he was saying, you know, for us to consider the other jurisdictions. And when we apply that equity lens, what I started thinking was, you know, Issaquah is a community where it's really difficult to find an affordable place to live. And it's also challenging to find an affordable rent if you're an organization providing services. So that being said, probably the most diverse communities live in neighboring jurisdictions and also have nonprofit organizations in neighboring jurisdictions that might be more affordable, right? And as long as they serve Issaquah residents, it might be valuable for us to consider that from an equity perspective. So that's my interpretation for what Manny was recommending. So definitely just much value to that. And I wanted to share with you what I was pondering there as an equity lens, right? So
I have a comment.
Go ahead. Thank you.
So, but it's kind of a catch-22 using that example you just gave, affordable housing. So if somebody moves, if there's more affordable housing in a neighboring community, if they move to that neighboring community, they're no longer a resident of Issaquah.
Yes, no, and I was not considering the Issaquah residents. I think I was considering the comment that Manny made was the employees of an organization and the location of an organization. You're absolutely right. Regardless, we would, no matter where an organization is, we would provide support only for Issaquah residents, right?
Got it.
Right. Yeah. No, great comment, Trish. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we wouldn't support if they were not residents of Issaquah.
I have
Okay.
a comment, Monica, about that really quickly. For me, it's helpful that I go through all these grants and then I'm doing my review cards, and a lot of these are really good grants, and I'm like, oh yeah, I would definitely recommend this for funding. And I'm just gonna, for me, I found it very helpful to just continue to go through them, and if I like them and they fit everything and they fit within the strategic plan, then I'll still recommend them for funding. But then when I'm done, I can go through and make a pile based on prioritize, and that's an easier way for me, and just a suggestion to everybody else if that might help them.
Yeah. Yes, that's a great. Thank you so much for that example. And also, not that I want to make it more challenging for you commissioners, but I want to bring forward some of the things we all learned in equity trainings, right? You may find, or may not, but you may find very well written grant applications, and you may find some other ones that may not be well written. When that's the case, before let's do a check-in on biases, and let's dive a little bit deeper in learning more about the organization, right? Because sometimes smaller organizations, or organizations that maybe have volunteers mainly, or have diverse employees or community members, might not have the capacity or funding to have a grant writer, and may just equally provide just as quality services as someone who has that opportunity. So again, I don't want to make it more challenging, but definitely I would encourage you to keep that in mind as you make work on your reviews. Okay, if any other questions for now, or if not, now we can move to the next slide. Thank you. And so this is a little bit from last month when we discussed kind of like how should we go about making recommendations for funding. I want to mention, first of all, between now and next month, when we meet in small groups, our role is going to be to go through a first review through the organizations, as Hina mentioned earlier. Let's do the first review, and we are going to work together in trying to prioritize them and narrow them. And it's going to be only after, in the second round of reviews, that we are going to start allocating money once we have a small pool enough to where we feel that it's manageable. So I don't want you to start worrying about adding funding to them now. However, as we consider the bigger picture, as last month we were also talking, we said that we can have smaller amounts and support more programs, or we can have larger amounts and support perhaps fewer programs. Or it was also proposed, like a third option, that maybe we can perhaps consider a combination of seed funding with also more impactful grants. From what we heard from City Council and what we heard from you last month, I think it makes sense for us to consider option 2 or 3, or a combination, something like that. And again, we don't need to have yet final decisions. I think we are going to take final decisions as we are going to start looking at how much organizations requested and how much funding we have. But for now, I think just a reminder of these options. And if anyone disagrees with perhaps looking at option 2 and 3. Comments, questions? I see a thumbs up from Trish.
Monica, we did have a question from Madeline. I cannot see it. I may have to stop sharing. 1 second. Madeline, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you here. Okay, go for it.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So based on what you were just saying about the city of Issaquah considering perhaps bigger grants for more impact, but that would be fewer organizations, and looking at the 1, 2, 3 that was on that most recent slide, is the city of Issaquah in general kind of moving a slightly different direction? Would this be considered a transition year in how these decisions are made?
Great question, Madeline. I think it could be considered a little bit of a transition for sure, because I think historically the Human Services Commission did recommend most often a large number of organizations with smaller amounts. And I think as the city has adopted its own large as the city adopted its own large strategic plan, and as the city is moving towards more metrics and tracking data for impact, I think, yes, the city itself, it is in a transition where there's more interest to look for impact and seeing where we can make a difference.
Thank you. That answers my question.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. Any other questions, commissioners? No? Okay, thank you. I think we are getting close to the end here, so thank you. I know it's a lot, but you are bringing such great questions, such a good conversation. So,
Monica, real quick,
hey, man.
I would like more discussions around the 1, 2, 3. I actually, I'm on the other side, prefer more the 1, but I can see, you know, to the population, to the mass of like, hey, for instance, like homelessness or folks that don't have shelter, you put more money to the impact. But there is also a lot of plus to the number 1 for a lot of grassroots organizations that don't get a lot of attention, that do rely on those few amounts of dollars that do impact those individuals. A lot of those larger organizations are admin heavy. And so I just want to put that out there is for me, I would like to have more discussion maybe down the road. I'll probably do that when I do my review scorecards and questions and so forth. But I get it. I think that's where a lot of human services are moving towards, right? Impact, target, but also at the discretion or at the cost of a lot of grassroots organizations that maybe don't have impact like that. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Thank you so much, Jaime, for bringing that up. And I think that's exactly, I think, why we would have option number 3, right? Because that provides a combination of seed funding for those smaller organizations, right? But then also selecting a few that make some more impact. That's how I would see it, like trying, because you're absolutely right. We don't want to hurt those small grassroots organizations that can provide such meaningful impact. So that's why my personal preference would be for an option 3 rather than just 1 or 2, right? Because I feel like 3, you know, provides like a good combination. But yeah, so great comment. Yes, we will continue some more. I think we are going to be able to have more meaningful and in-depth conversations once all the applications have been reviewed and all of you have a better sense of the organizations and the program services that they provide. So thank you. More to come on this.
I had 2 real quick questions off of that conversation. One is did Issaquah do any kind of recent community needs assessment survey?
Yes, we did it last year prior to the Human Services Strategic Plan. So the foundation for the Human Services Strategic Plan was a pretty robust community needs assessment, survey, interviews, focus groups. Yes.
I feel like that would be really helpful in making the decision for the 1, 2, and 3. You know, in that discussion, when we have more of a discussion around that, I think that maybe you guys can send that to us, because for me that would be really helpful. And I do appreciate Jaime's comment, and I totally agree with him. I help run a small grassroots organization that is grasping for any amount of dollars that we can get, and so I get that. But being a resident of Issaquah, I'm like, I know that there's some serious definite needs in this community, and for me, I'm like, I'd really like to focus on those too. Oh, my other question, based off of Jaime's comment, do we offer any kind of services for maybe doing a pilot program for grassroots organizations?
Such a great question, Jamie. Thank you so much. Actually, last funding cycle, we had a pilot for grassroots fund organizations. This year, we did not create a pilot because from the engagement that we do, we didn't see that there were smaller, newer organizations that would qualify. So we just went through the traditional granting process. But within this traditional granting process, we can identify the new organizations that might be smaller. They have not received funding from us, and just looking at piloting something with them.
So that would be an option if we, let's say we did go with option 2, right? But this new grassroots, we really like it and we think it would be impactful to our community. That's a possibility.
Absolutely, yes. That's
Okay.
why, like, none of these options, I think they're more for us to consider as we review those grants, but none of these options will be like, we are not going to lock ourselves in a block to say, oh, we chose this, so because of this, now we cannot fund this organization that seems to provide such great services, right?
Great.
Yeah, thank you. Great comments. Trish?
Yeah, and I just want to say number 2, which is give a lot of money to fewer organizations to make an impact. Okay, one of those, those organizations don't have to be HopeLink or, the big ones, it could be grassroots organizations that meet the strategic plan for Issaquah. So yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay, so just a brief review of our timeline moving forward. Today is June 15. We are meeting as a commission. In July, we were going to replace the large Human Services Commission meeting with small groups meetings. We might have 1 or we might have 2 in July, depending on the group, depending on how the first set of deliberation goes. We will decide during that first meeting and see how much we are able to get done, and if we need, we will schedule a second meeting. Then our hope is, again, in August, depending on how the deliberations work, we might continue a subgroup meeting, but we would like to come back as a larger group for the Human Services Commission regular meeting scheduled for August 17th. At that time, I think we would like to have an opportunity for the small groups to share with one another where they are at with deliberations, and then kind of like putting those smaller group information together with the larger group to work on finalizing the recommendations. At that time, again, we may decide at that meeting, depending on how much information the other commissioners need from the other groups, if we may need a special meeting towards the end of August to finalize those recommendations, hoping that, again, end of August, early September, we will be able to make our recommendations to the mayor. And it's not on this screen, but once we as a commission, so your job, hopefully it's going to be done at the end of August and we can celebrate. What happens next once the mayor receives your recommendations, she will include those recommendations in the city's budget process that typically she presents, the mayor presents her budget proposal to city council in September. So she will include your recommendations in that budget proposal. And then city council will deliberate on the budget, typically between September and November, their budget deliberations. And so those are the next steps here.
And then I saw Trish, did you have a question?
Well, yeah. And I realize that this is still kind of high level, but Monica and Hannah, in your timeline, where do you envision each group is going to know how much money they have to use?
Probably in July, in the second meetings in July, or early August. Yeah, we will also share them though with the entire commission. So it's not going to be that the small groups will know something that the other commission will not know.
Right.
But yeah,
Right.
we will share that with the other commission. So I envision that it's going to be after the first meeting that we have in small groups.
And do you envision that, and I can't remember the names, but I'm going to call our groups A, B, and C. Do you envision coming back and telling everybody, okay, group A has 50,000. No, actually, no, that would be too little. But anyways, you know, group A has 200,000, group B has 300, blah, blah, blah.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
That's how you would have, or what we did last time, we had a range that it was like not you had a range between this much and this much. And then we provided a range. But we did learn that probably it might be easier just to have one amount and just work with that. Yeah, we just don't want to provide that information right now since we are still discussing with City Council. We don't want to put the carriage in front of the horse and assume that any final decisions have been taken by City Council. And so then we don't want to do that. We just want to wait for that process to end and then work once we know the information. Does that make sense, Trish? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. Such great questions from all of you tonight. Thank you.
Monica,
Yes.
you said that our work would be done at the end of August. We have other tasks to do after that, yes?
Oh, yes, absolutely. The commission will continue. You will have regular meetings with the Human Services Commission. It's just your task for the grants will be done.
You had me worried there for a minute, Monica.
No. Just your grant task. Great questions.
I have one more question too. I'm sorry. I know we're running out of time here. When we get together with our little subgroups, will you guys have some kind of outline or structure for the way that we should? Okay, great.
Yeah, we'll help with that. Yes, absolutely. And tracking and all of that. So yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's why we are here to support and try to make it as easy as possible for everyone. And that's why we might actually take, we have our own spreadsheet that we use, but we might take Trisha's spreadsheet because it's fancier. It's well done. Okay, so yes, in terms of next steps, this is the time. If you didn't start reviewing, we definitely encourage you to review the grants that were assigned to you. Start writing down questions that you have about each application. Start, making your initial recommendations. Hannah will reach out to you. I believe that she already started reaching out to you to work on the scheduling the small group meetings. And then at the first, the first meeting, as we said, phase one at the first meeting, we'll work, and basically we are going to get together and we are going to share with one another your initial reactions, your initial categories. And then following that, we will prepare for the next meeting where we are going to continue in more depth deliberations if we are not able to agree, and or start assigning amounts to those top organizations. Next slide, Hannah. I think we are done. So any other final questions?
I just wanted to make a comment. Well, first of all, this was great. Lots of good information. And I hope everybody's, ready to dive in if they haven't already. But I wanted, Manny and Maury and I dove in early. And Maury and I were ready to get on the horn and call a bunch of agencies, after going through that last equity training where that facilitator was, wonderful. And she kept on saying, if you have questions, if it doesn't seem like a well-written grant, get on the phone and call the agency. So I wanted to, we reached out to you, Maury reached out to you, and we got your opinion on whether the commissioner should call the agency. So I thought you should maybe mention it to everybody.
Thank you, Trish. So I think as we mentioned earlier tonight, when you have questions about the agency, definitely write them down and send them to us. I think we want to be mindful of the agencies that work with several commissions, several cities. So just imagine that we are in a collaborative with 15 other cities. Each of them, if they have commissions, all of them have at least minimum 7 people. So if you have starting hundreds of people contacting agencies, we are just doing them a disservice. So that's why we would prefer that you don't contact agencies directly. You would make a list of those questions. Let's gather them all together. Perhaps Trish might have the same question that Maury has, or Pat, right? So then we can just coordinate and make it easier for the agencies. We will contact them. what's missing from this due to COVID and you don't have. And that's why, like, if we feel like we certainly there are options for us following the funding recommendations, is for you as a commission to start visiting those organizations. So typically, before COVID, in the off years, as Maury said earlier, in August, one part of your job is done. But typically, what we call in off years, so mainly in 2023, is where you would spend a year in visiting those organizations. So at the end of the year, in September, October, we will work on the work plan for 2023. And part of that, it's going to be going to get to know those organizations. So then at the next funding cycle, you have a better understanding of who does what. You're missing this part, some of it because some of you are new, but partly also we had COVID, and during COVID, everything was closed. So we could not visit those organizations. So I hope that's helpful in providing the why. We encourage you not to connect or contact organizations right now on your own, but yeah, don't take it as like, oh my gosh, you cannot because we, yeah, Pat.
Yes, thanks, Trish, for that question. And I know myself had questions for specific organizations, but I think it makes sense for all the questions to go through a single channel. But I also would like to say that I mean, for my line of work, we also know that when you reach out to an organization, it's an advantage you're giving to that organization because they get a chance to explain things to you that they were not on paper, and that might introduce bias. And that's why usually when a grant is out, no more talking to anybody. But we are a bit different here, right? So I see maybe the way to mitigate that will be to have all the questions channeled to the human service, and then you reach out to the organizations. Yeah.
I'm so glad that you brought it up because I completely forgot about that aspect, because yes, that's exactly the reason why we prefer to do it as staff, as we are not the ones making the recommendations and taking decisions. You're absolutely right. Once an organization, you connect with them, you connect on a personal level, and you don't have that chance with the others. So then yes, you do create automatically a bias. Absolutely. Thank you for bringing that up, Pat.
Great. Thank you, everyone, for such a helpful conversation. Again, our goal is after this meeting that now you can dive deeper into these applications confidently and know how to use our review tool card and make some recommendations. So great questions and conversation tonight. So as we are over time, I'm going to go ahead and pass it back to Trish to continue us through the packet and wrap us up.
Okay, well, yeah, we are over time, so I will hopefully quickly adjourn us. But I do want to encourage folks to attend the June 22nd meeting, because I'm hearing some scuttlebutt that we might get more money. So I think it would be really very important and helpful just to have a good flank of human service commissioners there. So, and if you can't attend, you can always watch the YouTube later. So, does anybody have anything else they want to contribute before we sign off?
I want to thank Hannah for contributing that, for amending the review card. I think that's a really good addition. Thank you.
Thank you for the recommendation, Trish.
Okay, well, I will adjourn us at 8:06. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.